ANWR stands for Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And it's a giant protected park, a wilderness area that is just magnificent. Mountains, as gorgeous as you can picture in your head. Lots of biodiversity. Now, the northern part of ANWR, and you see it's roughly the size of the whole state of South Carolina. The northernmost part of it is pretty flat. It's kind of ugly and boring looking, but it's still part of the protected land. So they've discovered, they did a couple of test wells with permission, and they discovered that, yeah, there's a bunch of oil up there too. But because it was a protected wilderness, nobody has been allowed to drill in it. Now, every time we get Republican president or Congress, there is a push to open it up for drilling. And of course, the environmentalists step in and say, oh my gosh, really? We're going to drill this? Oil's that? It's money, right? Well, Obama was able to stop it for 8 years, block everything. But then Trump took over. He said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and open this up and drill it. Now, they've actually got some creative ways of drilling it where they say it's not going to disrupt the wilderness, right? Promises, promises. So they're going to like do horizontal drilling so that they don't have to disrupt the surface very much. Anyway, this thing pops into the news all the time. Should we or shouldn't we? It wasn't just ANWR that Trump went after. He opened up protected lands out west in like Colorado and New Mexico, and huge outrage from the environmental community, but they're drilling for oil and gas and business from that political side of the spectrum. Let me show you what's actually going on with TAPS, though. Again, the engineer in me just thinks this is amazing. First of all, they do clean it once in a while. They shut down sections and they send this little scrubber through. It's a little robe. It's kind of like iRobot for your house. These little scrubbers are mechanical and go through and spin. I like their names, though. They're called pigs. These are the pig scrubbers. Here you can see that, well, yes, they've built this pipeline right through beautiful wilderness. These are actually, it's a little more complicated than I'm describing, but these are vents that allow the heat to go up instead of down and into the air. And once again, that protects the permafrost. Remember that Alaska is part of the Ring of Fire, and they are susceptible to huge subduction thrust earthquakes. In fact, the biggest earthquake ever in the United States was in Alaska, 1964. Shook the ground for 2 minutes straight. So they had to build this pipeline so that it could survive a mega quake. And so they put it on sliders, and it literally slides like a snake if there's tectonic action. That also allows for expansion and contraction of the pipe when the seasons change. So you can see on some of them, they actually brought the pipeline underneath the rivers to not provide any sort of disruption. And others, they constructed, and here's a suspension bridge holding the pipeline up across the river. Okay, well, that's not the only pipeline that that is controversial in the United States. There is a process that is happening in Canada called tar sands extraction. Now, I'm going to teach you about tar sands next week, but they have to get the tar sands crude oil down to our refineries. And so they are building, there's existing pipelines, but they're looking for shortcuts. So they proposed this path that runs through here, and it is one you may have heard of. You follow environmental news. It's called the Keystone XL. Again, we're talking money, right? This saves the oil company money. It allows us to have cheap energy. And once again, our politicians have gone back and forth on allowing this pipeline or blocking it. What's the big controversy here? Well, this one crosses the Ogallala Aquifer. Do we remember that from first semester? The Ogallala is that gigantic water aquifer that's under the ground that's so important to our farmers. And the concern is that, well, we know pipelines can spring leaks. And what happens if all that oil gets into our aquifer? DAPL. So DAPL is the Dakota Access Pipeline. And this is the one that really has been in the news because it affects a Native American reservation, and they have been adamantly protesting this and fighting against it. Their argument, of course, is they want to protect their water supply. So here's the controversy once again. This pipeline, once again, is bringing natural gas down from where they frack in the Dakotas. We're going to cover fracking next week in detail. And look, it does not actually cross or enter the reservation. So that's a piece of misinformation. A lot of people think it goes through their reservation. It does not. But once again, their argument is water. And look, the major source of water for the reservation is the Missouri River. And look where it crosses. Right before the reservation, it crosses the Missouri River. So the issue, once again, is if this leaks and oil gets in the Missouri River, they are directly affected by that. These are the pipelines that run through the United States. They're not all crude oil. Some of them are natural gas. That's NGL, liquid natural gas. Some of it is refined products like gasoline, jet fuel. So we've got all these different pipelines. That's our infrastructure. And that's why it's so hard to let go of fossil fuels, because everything we built for 100 years is designed for fossil fuels, and it's our cheapest energy source. I'm a big fan of nuclear energy, which you'll learn in a couple of weeks. And everybody's like, oh, but nuclear energy is so dangerous. Well, didn't we just learn yesterday people died on an oil rig, people died in the oil refinery? Look at this. From a 5-year period, there were over 3,000 leaks in our pipelines, and it killed people. There are deaths associated with these. In 5 years, almost 100 people died. Don't tell me that fossil fuels are safer than nuclear, because the statistics don't back that up. And then we're not even talking about respiratory disease, environmental degradation. Pipelines leak. I could spend an hour showing you leaks in pipelines. Don't worry, I'm not going to. That's taps. That's Alaska. You can tell from the vents.